Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere vast, so vast in fact, that your first step feels like falling into sky. You're standing on the Mongolian steppe and everything around you is endless. Grass ripples in waves, the air smells of wool ash and faintly sour milk. In the distance, someone's goat sneezes. You're not in a city, you're not in a village. You're in a place where people move with the seasons and the house you slept in. Yeah, you're about to take it apart. You step out of the round, felt-lined gyre, what the West calls a yurt, and blink into the rising sun. The air is still cool, the kind of sharp chill that whispers, "Enjoy this while it lasts." In about 3 hours, this place will be an oven. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing where this sleepy little caravan ends up. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pull on a tunic undyed wool, scratchy but dependable, and step barefoot onto the pressed grass outside. Around you, the camp is already in motion. Children chase sheep. A dog yawns. A woman stirs something thick and white in a wooden bowl. But your job right now is the gyre, and you're starting from the top. The felt dome overhead is tied at the center to a wooden ring, the crown or tuno. From it, long, slender rafters called uni stretch outward like the ribs of a great sleepy animal. Beneath that, the wooden lattice wall or kana forms the round shape. Everything fits together without nails. It's tension and trust holding your home upright. You begin at the crown. Untie the smoke flap first. That's the thing that keeps wind from howling directly down into your soup pot at night. You fumble it a bit. The knots are always tighter when your fingers are still waking up. One slip and a tuft of camel wool hits you in the face. Welcome to GR disassembly. The roof poles come next. You slide them out, gently stacking them on a piece of sheepskin to keep them from soaking in morning dew. One by one, the uni come free until the crown ring sits on its own, wobbling slightly, like it knows its reign is over. You lower it carefully, it's heavier than it looks. Legend says you can always tell a new groom from how loudly he grunts lowering the crown. You move on to the felt. Thick sheets of sheep wool pressed, sun-dried, and slightly smoky from countless campfires. You unlash them from the kana walls. They flop like exhausted animals. Roll each one tightly. If you leave them loose, they catch the wind, and you really don't want to be that person whose insulation blows away during migration. Underneath, the kana walls begin to fold, zigzagging inwards like a collapsing accordion. It's beautiful, really, how this structure that looked so permanent 10 minutes ago folds into a neat stack no taller than a yak. And just like that, your home is a bundle of sticks, rugs, and rope, ready to move. There's a quiet magic to this process. Mongol gyrs aren't meant to root you in place. They're meant to lift, carry, unfold again. Mobility is the architecture. No basements, no bricks. But the moment you rebuild it somewhere new, it still feels like home. You pause, wiping your hands. Around you, others are doing the same. Some faster, some slower. An old man in a deep blue robe is wrapping a saddle blanket with the efficiency of a monk folding parchment. A young boy kicks at a pile of dried dung, muttering about chores. Someone's singing low, melodic, and unhurried. It blends into the soundscape like another bird call. Nearby, a family has already started loading their koram, the wooden cart pulled by oxen or camels. You help lift the crown ring onto the pile, tying it down with braided horsehair rope. Every item has a place. Every tie has a rhythm. There are no blueprints, but you follow the hands of others, and slowly the pattern reveals itself. The sun is climbing now. You squint toward the east. The horizon is still flat, still featureless, but you know somewhere out there is the next camp, the next grazing land, the next bowl of fermented mare's milk waiting under canvas. As you finish loading the last rolled-up felt sheet, you can't help but marvel. You just packed your house, your entire house. And it took what? An hour, 2. Try doing that with drywall and a mortgage. Historians still argue whether the Mongols' nomadic design was a response to environment or a philosophical choice, whether the jur was simply practical or also deeply symbolic. Maybe both, maybe neither. But what's clear is that this lifestyle wasn't haphazard. It was engineered for movement, refined through centuries. And now as you look back at the empty patch of earth where your home stood, you don't see loss. You see readiness. You mount up, or, okay, you attempt to mount up. Your legs don't swing quite the right way. The horse gives you a withering look that suggests you are definitely not the first city dweller to almost fall sideways onto a pile of bricks. But with some wobble and a surprising squeak, you're in the saddle. Ahead, the caravan begins to move. A long line of carts, horses, riders. Wool bundles and wooden frames, swaying gently in time. It's not fast, it's not loud, but it's steady. And in a world this big, that's what matters. You glance one last time at the place you camped. Nothing remains but faint impressions in the grass. But somewhere in those prints is the memory of warmth, of sleep, of a home that will rise again before nightfall. And so you ride. The steppe stretching ahead, the sun warming your back, and your house bouncing gently on the cart behind you, waiting to be built again, cool and round, wherever you choose to stop. The grass sways beneath the hooves, rhythmic and soft, as the caravan glides over the morning plain. It's still early enough that the light feels kind, casting long blue shadows and warming your sleeves without boiling your spine. The carts creak with familiar complaint wood on wood rope, tugging against loaded bundles. A crow flies overhead and lets out a single raspy caw. You nod at it. Even birds seem to know this route by now. You're perched beside the family's lead cart, your hands calloused from the morning's folding session. The road, such as it is really just the memory of wheels pressed again and again into the same rolling path by generations of oxen and patience. You hear the soft jingle of harness bells, the clink of bone toggles, and the faintest squeak from one of the leather straps overhead. That strap's going to need retying eventually. But right now, you're admiring the view. The cart ahead sways like a boat carrying the dismantled bones of the family's home, the wooden lattice folded tight, the felt layers rolled and stacked, the tonneau roof crown lashed to the side like a halo waiting to rise. The entire structure rides like it's part of the animal pulling it. The wheels are wide wood-planked, lashed tight with leather. Mongol carts weren't built for turning. They were built for enduring. The goal was never to zigzag across hills, but to cross continents slowly without spilling your cheese. Speaking of cheese, your stomach growls, which is frankly a little insulting considering what you've got riding along with you. You reach into the cart and pull out a pouch made of stitched rawhide. It's warm and damp on the outside. Inside, liquid treasure. This is arag, the fermented mare's milk that fuels Mongol nomads like rocket fuel with a yogurt kick. This batch has been sloshing against the side of the cart since before dawn, jostled with every turn of the wheel. Which is perfect. You see, Mongols don't churn their milk by hand. They travel it into fermentation. A good ride is as important as a good starter culture. You uncork the pouch and take a sip. It's cold, not icy, but cool enough to make your eyes widen with surprise. The outer layer of rawhide sweats slightly, and as the cart moves, the wind evaporates the moisture, pulling heat from the liquid inside. Basic physics. Advanced refreshment. There's a debate about who first discovered this method. Some say it was, by accident, milk forgotten in a bag slung over a saddle. Others claim it was intentional, a clever use of the ever-moving Mongol lifestyle. Historians still argue whether this counts as a form of primitive refrigeration or simply highly optimized dairy abuse. Either way, it works. Next to the arag pouch is a smaller skin bag filled with unfermented milk, cooled in the same way, tied off with a simple leather thong. Milk doesn't keep long on the steppe, especially under the hot breath of the midday sun, but for a few hours this method preserves it just long enough to be useful. If you're lucky, you'll get it cooled in time to make kefir or start a fresh batch of cheese. The trick is in the movement and the airflow. These bags are often hung from carts or saddles to maximize slosh per mile. Some even argue that a well-traveled milk bag tastes better. It's got character. You imagine pitching that at a supermarket now with 40 kilometers of flavor. Another cart rumbles by its sides, festooned with clinking ladles and spoons. A girl riding alongside is singing to her horse. The melody repeats low and haunting. Probably a song her grandmother used to hum while churning butter. Mongol culture isn't passed down in textbooks. It's carried in voices, in habits, in the muscle memory of wrapping rope and swinging saddle. You take another sip, savoring the tartness. It's not a flavor that Western palates crave immediately, part milk, part beer, part something you dare a friend to drink at a sleepover. But here, it's comfort, it's home, it's hydration and nutrition, and mild intoxication, all in one leather-wrapped miracle. You glance at the felt-wrapped bundle behind you where someone's packed dried curds arul. These rock-hard, chalky cheese nuggets are made by pressing sour milk into small cakes and leaving them to dry in the wind. You bite into one. It's like chewing a rock that's really into dairy. But after a minute, it softens. A little. And you admit it is kind of nice with the airag. The sun climbs higher, and the road flattens. The horizon yawns ahead, and you begin to feel the day's weight settling on your shoulders. But the caravan doesn't stop. Not yet. The pace remains steady, each cart part of a long, slow heartbeat. You pass a cluster of wildflowers, their heads drooping toward the ground. A hawk circles high above. A toddler bounces on a cart with alarming joy, completely immune to the possibility of falling off. Then comes the break. Around mid-morning, the caravan slows and veers off its invisible path toward a cluster of low, rounded hills. The oxen groan grateful. Riders dismount. Wheels are chalked. And the camp once again begins to bloom. You're assigned to unpack the bundles. The felt is heavy now, warm from the ride, but still pliable. You lay it out on the grass to cool. Nearby, the kitchen is unfolding, literally. A canvas cover becomes a lean-to. A pile of dung bricks becomes a stove. A milk bag is rehung on a pole, swinging lightly in the breeze. You watch an old woman take down a sack of dried herbs and begin steeping them in a small pot of hot water. The scent is earthy, sharp, soothing. She waves you over and hands you a bowl. Inside is fresh yogurt spooned from a skin pouch and cooled beside a bag of damp sand. You dip your fingers in cool. Not chilled, but cool enough to make you sigh. She smiles. The horse helps, she says, pointing to the pouch, but the wind finishes it. You nod, understanding more than the words. As the midday heat creeps in, the group rests. Some nap, some repair gear. One man reties his stirrups with a frown that suggests the leather offended him personally. A child attempts to ride a sheep and is gently scolded. You sit beneath the shade of a cart, cradling your yogurt and wondering just how many things Mongols manage to cool without ice. The answer is more than you'd think. Between evaporative cooling, subterranean storage, clever airflow, and a deep understanding of timing, they built a refrigeration system without a single plug. It moved. It adapted. It was made of skin air and time. And you're starting to feel the rhythm of it. The way milk becomes airag, not with effort, but with motion. The way food stays fresh, not through battle, but through patience. The way you don't fight the sun, you outsmart it. You stretch bones popping like dry twigs and glance at the line of carts ahead. Your home, your drink, your food. Everything you need is right there, on wheels, in motion, chilled by wind and wisdom. And the journey continues. By late afternoon, the grass has turned a paler green under the weight of the sun. The sky stretches wide like someone forgot to put a ceiling on this place, and everything shimmers with heat. But you're not moving right now. The caravan is stopped beside a low creek, and the oxen are drinking slowly, eyes half closed, as if savoring every drop like a dessert. You sit nearby, cross-legged, watching one of the younger men set up a temporary shade structure. A wide canvas tent propped up on poles, weighted with saddlebags and bundles of dried dung. He whistles as he works, occasionally swatting at flies that seem immune to intimidation. Around you, the camp breathes. No one rushes. The work is steady, deliberate, like everyone knows they've done this 1,000 times before. Which they have. You're handed a bowl of something thick and white, sprinkled with dried herbs and salt. Tarag, someone says. Yogurt made from sheep's milk, this time cooled beside the stream in a clay jar buried halfway into the sand. You take a bite. It's cold, actually cold, and your eyebrows rise. Someone chuckles. You buried it, you say, mouth full. A woman nods. Always. If there is no stream, we dig deeper. And just like that, another piece of the puzzle slots into place. You walk with her to the edge of the camp, where a shallow pit has been dug, a sort of natural refrigerator. Inside, you find several tightly sealed clay pots and wooden buckets. The air down there is noticeably cooler, the sun never quite reaching the bottom. It's the earth doing the heavy lifting, absorbing heat, slowly releasing it even slower. Thermal inertia, though no one calls it that here. They just know it works. Historians still argue, she says, if this was learned from China or if they learned it from us. She shrugs. But the ground cools the same, no matter who's watching. You touch one of the jars. It's wrapped in a thin layer of damp felt and sealed with beeswax. Inside, probably cheese or maybe a bit of leftover broth from the last stop. Either way, it's safe. It's waiting. It's cold. You glance over at another section of camp where a few children are playing a game with bones, sheep knuckles used like dice. One of them stops to drink from a leather flask hanging in the shadow of a cart. That flask, you now realize, is working double time. The skin sweats, the breeze evaporates the moisture, and the liquid inside stays cool enough to trick your body into thinking it's not 90 degrees in the shade. The sun begins to dip lower. Shadows stretch longer. You help secure a few of the carts, tying down a bundle of saddle pads that have slid loose. Then someone calls you over to the fire pit where dinner is bubbling in a cast-iron cauldron. Stew, with mutton, potatoes, onions, and a healthy dose of arag ladled in like stock. The scent is heady, earthy, sour, in a good way. You take your bowl and sit beside a man named Borchi. He's older, his beard gray, his hands scarred from decades of rope work and weather. He gestures at your bowl. You like cold, he asks. You nod. Very much. He points at the sky. Then we build when it's dark. You pause spoon halfway to your mouth. He means it literally. Some parts of camp, the sleeping platforms, the felt wraps. Even the shaded storage pits are repaired, rebuilt, or laid out after sunset. Not because it's easier, but because they can better judge airflow when the winds are cool and still. You feel the draft better then, he says. You know if your vent is right. You finish your stew, and the fire dies down. The camp grows quiet. No one yells. No one slams doors. There are no doors to slam, just leather flaps and polite throat clearings. Night falls fully, and stars emerge in great unrushed waves. The Milky Way is so clear you almost want to scoop it up like soup. Someone lights a small oil lamp near the center of the camp, and a circle forms, adults sipping arag, children leaning against parents, a dog or two sprawled in the dust like furry pillows. And then it happens, a song, low and steady, sung in a minor key. It tells of a man who carried milk across the mountain to find a woman who lived beneath the sky. Half love story, half weather report, full of dust wind and the quiet triumph of not spilling your dinner. You learn something in that moment, something that isn't written in any history book. Cooling for the Mongols isn't about battling the heat. It's about rhythm. It's about listening to the wind, feeling the draft, trusting the slosh of a milk bag tied to your saddle. It's in the way you layer, felt the way you bury your jars, the way you stir your arag with a wooden ladle handed down 5 generations. You sleep that night in the open beneath a lean-to made of 2 saddle blankets and a pole. The stars above don't blink. The air is crisp dry and for a while perfect. Just before you drift off, you hear the faint creak of a cartwheel turning in the wind. Tomorrow you'll ride again, and the milk it'll keep. You wake to the sound of hoofbeats, soft and measured, like someone respectfully knocking on the earth. Dawn is just a thought on the horizon, not yet a promise. The sky is washed in slate blue, and the stars are slowly retreating, one shy cluster at a time. A thin layer of dew clings to the grass around your bedroll, soaking the hem of your sleeve as you stretch. You sit up your joints, groaning slightly, and watch the camp come to life in the gentle quiet of early light. The Mongols don't start their day with alarm clocks or shouty roosters. They rise with the air, and the air this morning is cool, dry calm. Perfect conditions for what comes next. Dismantling. The felt has rested overnight. Any trapped heat has long since dissipated, and the night's breeze has left it firm, but still pliable. You join a small team of women and older children already unfastening the ropes securing the walls of the jair. One girl hums a tune as she works, tapping the wooden pegs twice before pulling them free. Her rhythm is confident, methodical. You try to match it. You pull back the outer felt layer, first thick hand-compressed wool, still smelling faintly of sheep and smoke. Beneath it lies the lattice wall called the khana, folded like a concertina. It collapses with surprising grace as if it's tired from holding its shape all night. You help guide it into a neat stack, then lift one end and carry it to the cart. It's heavy. Not I'm going to pass out heavy, but certainly don't drop it on your foot heavy. And it's warm still. The wood, heated by the people sleeping inside, has stored some of the night's last warmth. You feel it against your palms as you lift. The tuno, the wooden crown of the roof, rests on the ground nearby. It's perfectly circular, carved with symbols you don't recognize, though you suspect they carry meaning about air ancestors or maybe weather. Two long poles lay beside it, part of the frame that will one day rise again. One of the elders oversees the loading, her eyes scanning every bundle. She barks once when someone tries to stack the felt before it's cooled fully. "Let it breathe," she says, not unkindly. "Warm felt makes bad milk." You pause. That's new. You follow her instructions, spreading the felt layers loosely over the side of a cart, allowing the breeze to pull heat and moisture away before they're bundled for travel. She walks past you, muttering something about mildew and young people in a language older than the mountains. And then breakfast. It's not elaborate. A bowl of arul, those hard sun-dried cheese, crumbles you've come to respect, if not love, and a ladle of fresh milk still warm from the mare. The milk is poured from a wooden bucket wrapped in a damp cloth, and even this short moment of contact with the morning wind has cooled it to a pleasant temperature. You sip slowly, savoring the balance of heat and chill. As the camp finishes packing, you take a moment to explore the milk station. Yes, that's a real thing. It's a small open-air platform shaded with a thatched screen where dairy is handled with the kind of reverence most people reserve for fine jewelry or rare books. There's a pouch for fresh milk, another for arag in progress, and a third for aged milk curdled and well on its way to becoming some kind of cheese. Each bag is labeled not with words, but with small knots in the leather strap. 1 knot for fresh, 2 for fermenting, 3 for storage. You note this system equal parts practical and poetic. A small boy stands on a wooden stool, his job clearly designated rocking the arag bag. He doesn't churn it, he doesn't stir it. He just gently shifts his weight side to side, causing the liquid to slosh in its pouch. The sound is hypnotic, like a distant tide. He smiles when he catches you watching. "It sings," he says. You nod. Yes, it kind of does. As the sun rises higher, the last of the carts are loaded. You walk past one that's been specially adapted, a small leather compartment, strapped underneath the platform, right above the axle. Inside is a set of smaller skin pouches and lidded jars. You reach in, and your fingers brush against cool clay. It's a mobile cold cellar. The wind generated by the cart's movement flows beneath the boards across the sweating skins and pulls heat away from the jars as they rattle gently with every bump. You hold one for a moment, amazed. It's cold, not frozen, not icy, but definitely several degrees cooler than the morning air. There's still scholarly debate about how much the Mongols intentionally engineered these setups versus how much was sheer observational genius. Did they understand convection thermodynamics? Probably not in terms Newton would later define. But they understood results. They knew where to place things, when to wrap them, how to arrange layers of felt and leather to trap cool air and protect milk like treasure. You're handed a jar of chilled broth with slices of boiled meat and onion floating lazily inside. For the road, someone says. You take it grateful. Not only does it smell incredible, it's cool. The clay has done its work. You climb into your cart again, your thighs already protesting the wooden seat, and settle in for another day of travel. The caravan starts to move slowly with the grace of something older than wheels. You watch the hills pass. A hawk glides low. A small stream sparkles like a broken mirror in the distance, and the jar in your hands stays cool, steady, dependable. As midday approaches, a rider gallops ahead, scouting the route, checking for trouble, maybe just enjoying the speed. You envy him briefly, but then he vanishes into the sunlit haze. You return your gaze to the path and take a sip of broth. The taste is savory, salty, satisfying. Behind you, the airag bag sloshes in time with the oxen. Beside you, the breeze hums against the leather pouch. Inside you, the chill remains. You're not just traveling, you're refrigerating Mongol style. The road today curves gently through a wide valley, framed on either side by hills that shimmer with the illusion of movement. Heat ripples rise from the dirt, making the grass seem to sway even when the wind has taken a break. Your cart creaks along at its usual pace, the oxen plodding in rhythm heads, low tails swishing like pendulums. It's quiet, but not empty. There's a fullness in the air that feels almost musical. You find yourself riding next to an older woman today. Her name is Tsetseg, and she's the kind of person whose age you can't quite guess, not because she hides it, but because she wears it so well. Her braids are streaked with silver, and her voice is low, like rain on canvas. She's stirring something. It's not soup. It's not milk. It's something between. A curdled mixture of yogurt water and herbs sloshing around inside a narrow goat skin. She calls it kailmag, and before you can ask, she hands you the ladle. Don't drink too fast, she warns. You don't. It's tart, creamy cold from where it's been resting against the side of the cart all morning. You nod in appreciation, and she smiles just a little. How does it stay cool, you ask? She points to the goat skin. It breathes. And there's the secret again. It's everywhere you look, materials that breathe. That evaporate. That release. Whether it's the felt that wicks away heat, or the rawhide flasks that sweat like they're working out, the Mongols understood something that modern science would take centuries to name evaporative cooling. The skin loses moisture, the air whisks it away, and the contents chill, not like a fridge, but like a breeze through wet grass. Tsetseg gestures to her pouch again. We never use closed vessels. They trap the heat. Let the air touch it. You sip again. She nods like a teacher who's just watched you figure out how to tie your own shoes. Ahead, the caravan slows. A shallow depression in the ground, barely noticeable from a distance, has revealed itself to be a seasonal spring. The lead rider circles back to confirm, and soon carts begin steering toward it. A break. A gift. As the camp sets up, you wander toward the edge of the water, where several goatskins and clay jugs have already been placed in the shallowest part of the stream. A few of them are bobbing, gently tethered to small stakes with leather cords. The trick, someone tells you, is to find that perfect depth, not so deep that the current knocks the container over, but not so shallow that it sits in warm mud. You try placing one of the food jars you've been carrying. It's heavier than expected, but you settle it gently into the water, letting the coolness lick the sides. Instantly, the clay feels cooler to the touch. It's like watching the temperature drop in real time, no electricity required. Nearby, a pair of teenage boys are experimenting with something clever. They've dug a narrow channel from the spring to their campsite and lined it with rocks. Water trickles through at a lazy pace, and over it they've placed bundles of herbs, pouches of milk, and even a bowl of sliced apples. One of them waves you over. "It's for the air," he says. You blink. The water cools the air, he clarifies. Then, the air cools the tent. Sure enough, the tent nearest the little channel has its flap tied wide open, allowing the breeze to flow across the trickling water before drifting inside. A wind-powered air conditioner made from stick stones and a bit of math. Historians still debate whether these kinds of channel-based systems were unique to the Mongols or borrowed from neighboring cultures like the Uyghurs or Tibetans. Either way, they work, and they work well. Back in the main camp, a pot of stew is now simmering over a low flame. You're invited to help with prep chopping wild onions and garlic with a curved knife that's seen more sunrises than you have birthdays. You ask if they store meat somehow, or if it's all eaten fresh. Tsetseg, now perched like a queen on a flat stone, answers before anyone else can. "We dry it," she says. "Or bury it." "Bury it, you ask." She nods. "Wrap it in hide seal with fat and dig deep. The ground is a better cook than most people I know." You laugh, mostly because she doesn't. Later, you're shown one of these meat caches. It's about 1.5 feet underground, covered in layers of felt and earth, then marked with a stick tipped in black ink. Inside the hide wrap, slabs of semi-dried goat fern and dark-smelling slightly of garlic and smoke. It's not frozen, but it's not spoiling either. You take a small piece, chew thoughtfully. It's savory, chewy, salty, the kind of food that makes your teeth work for their meal and your body thank you later. The sun arcs overhead, then begins its descent. Evening approaches and the air turns buttery with late light. You sit by a small fire, feeling the weight of the day in your spine and shoulders. Someone pours fresh milk into a wide wooden bowl and begins to whisk it furiously. Foam forms, froth bubbles. Eventually, a layer of butter will float to the surface and be skimmed off. The rest, chilled, strained, stored. And in all of it, the felt, the skins, the water, the earth, there's one lesson repeated like a drumbeat: cold isn't captured. It's invited, coaxed, preserved not by force, but by balance. You lie down later in the soft hum of twilight. The wind picks up, slipping past your cart like a lullaby. And somewhere behind you, a jar of milk rests in a shallow trench, wrapped in damp felt, kissed by breeze and shade. Tomorrow it will still be cool. You wake to birdsong, not the cheerful chirping of a Disney morning, mind you, but the gritty, sandpapery croak of a desert lark that sounds like it hasn't had enough coffee. The sky is a pale gray canvas, slowly being painted with amber. Your body aches slightly from yesterday's ride, and your ankles are stiff. But your breath is deep, and the coolness, clinging to the air, feels earned. You stretch, shuffle to your feet, and walk barefoot over dew-damp grass toward the morning fire. The flames are small, contained in a pit lined with flat stones, and the kettle, resting on the embers, hisses like it knows secrets. You nod to the woman tending it. She pours you a cup of something milky and warm, fermented, definitely. Slightly sour. Surprisingly comforting. The caravan is already stirring, carts being rebalanced, goats being corralled, ropes being tightened and retied. You hear the low whinny of a horse, the familiar creak of wooden axles, and somewhere nearby the unmistakable rhythm of felt being folded. But today is different. Today you're not just observing, you're learning how to build your own Mongol cooling system. Your instructor, a boy no older than 16 with wild hair, quick hands, and the kind of confidence you only get from having built 3 yurts before your voice finished cracking. His name is Chulin, and he has appointed himself your personal mentor. First, he shows you how to weave a mat from reeds and goat hair. This is the wrap, he says. The first layer. It lets the water out, but not too fast. He hands you a bundle of reeds and nods. You fumble at first, your fingers clumsy with the rhythm, but eventually you find a pattern. Over, under, twist, tighten, knot. He checks your work with the same expression a cat might give a toddler holding a violin. Not bad, he says, and you bask in the high praise. Next comes the lining a pouch made from rawhide stiff but slightly pliable when wet. He demonstrates how to soak it just enough so it becomes soft, then form it into a round shape by binding it around a smooth stone. You both laugh when the pouch slips and sprays water all over your boots. Then comes the test. Will it cool? Chulun places a lump of fresh cheese into the pouch, ties it with a leather thong, and hangs it in the shadow beneath a cart just above ground level. Now we wait, he says. You look at him. For how long? He shrugs. When it tastes better. While you wait, the camp continues its routine. You help grind dried barley into flour using a flat stone and a heavy disc. The powder is bitter fine and somehow satisfying to create. You sprinkle it into a boiling pot of water mix in dried herbs and a pinch of salt. The result? A soup so plain it loops back around to delicious. During the meal, you ask about milk again. Why is it so central? Why not just carry water? Chulun looks puzzled, because milk is alive. You blink. Water is empty. Milk feeds you, fills, you keeps. He picks up a gourd and shakes it gently, and it remembers the cold better. There's actually truth to this. Mare's milk used for airag spoils faster than cows or goat's milk, but it also cools faster due to its lower fat content. That makes it perfect for quick chilling using porous vessels. Mongol logic once again aligns perfectly with modern thermodynamics. Later that day you try another cooling experiment. This time Chulun brings out what looks like a small barrel made of tightly wrapped birch bark. This is for moving airag, he says. It's lined with clay and straw, then strapped to the side of a fast horse. Not just to transport, he says, but to shake it. As the horse gallops, the motion stirs the milk. The wind cools it, and by the time it arrives at its destination, it's fermented, chilled, and ready to serve. Portable refrigeration. Horse-powered. You watch as a young rider mounts up with the barrel tied to his saddle. He circles once, then kicks off into the grasslands like an arrow loosed from a bow. You stand in the dust he leaves behind, blinking. That, Chulun says, is how you chill and churn. There's a lull in the afternoon. The camp naps mostly. A few goats bleat. A child giggles in her sleep. The only real sound is the flap of felt being repaired, a patch here, a stitch there. You lie beneath a cart and pull the cheese pouch from its resting spot. It's cool. No, really. It's genuinely cool to the touch even though the air is warming around you. You untie the thong, open the wrap, and take a cautious bite. Tangy, creamy, and just a little firm. Better, cooler, preserved. You grin. Chulun, sitting nearby, offers a piece of dried meat. Next, he says, we bury it. He shows you how to dig a shallow pit, line it with smooth stones, and layer it with grass. Then the food is placed inside sealed jars, smoked meat, even root vegetables, wrapped in damp cloth. A felt cover goes over the top, then a wooden lid, then more grass and dirt. The earth, he says, patting the mound. It's not just ground, it's house. Historians still argue whether Mongol people engineered these ground pantries deliberately or adapted them from earlier nomadic practices. Some point to similarities in Bronze Age burials, stone rings, mound shapes, sealed chambers. Others think the cooling effect was simply a practical discovery. Dig deep, stay fresh. You sit on the mound afterward, drinking another cup of that oddly delicious kailmag. Chulun tells you that when he was little, he believed the cold came from spirits under the earth. My grandmother said they were snow spirits who didn't like noise. That's why we whisper when we check the jars. You smile. The sun leans low again, brushing everything with a coppery glow. You've spent the entire day learning how to make the air, the earth, and the milk work together. And somehow, it's all made sense. No electricity, no machinery, just rhythm, texture, patience. Before bed, you peek into one of the reed-wrapped coolers by the cooking station. Inside a melon, a whole one, and it's cold. You ask who did that. Chulun shrugs, someone who listens. You lie down with that melon in mind. Round, heavy, fragrant. The kind of fruit that whispers a promise you don't have to fight the heat. just outthink it. The morning fog is faint like a silk scarf drawn across the face of the plain. You blink slowly as the camp reawakens, fires crackling low and smoke curling into the pale sky. Today, you ride farther into open land, flat as a tabletop, but dotted here and there with the dark spots of distant herds and the pale humps of gurs tucked beside winding streams. You've started to pick up the rhythm. You know when to pack the tent, when to tighten the straps around the goatskin bundles, when to step aside for the older herders with their lines of weary camels. Your hands bear tiny blisters. Your voice is lower, slower, and somehow your sense of time feels looser. Today's lesson, however, is not about riding or folding or even chilling milk. It's about wind. Not just any wind, the kind Mongols call amgalan salhi, the peaceful wind. It's the breath that cools yurts dries, meat brushes sweat from a horse's flank, and most crucially, keeps food from turning sour before its time. Your teacher this morning is an old man named Batu, whose beard appears to have given up trying to grow in one direction. He stands beside a raised stone slab, fanning something with a broad piece of bark. It smells like garlic and goat, a kind of air-dried curd flattened and stacked like clay tiles. You call it wind, he says. We call it helper. The curd is arul, a Mongol staple made from strained yogurt dried slowly over days or weeks depending on weather. It begins soft, pliable, almost sweet. But under the wind's patient hand, it hardens into something chewy, sour, and shelf-stable for months, sometimes even years. You try a piece. It's sharp, dry, and curiously addictive. The more you chew, the more flavor it reveals, milk and thyme, and something that tastes like sun on stone. Batu shows you the drying rack, a simple wooden frame draped in horsehair cloth. It's angled to face the breeze, and the curd is spaced just enough to allow airflow between each piece. If the air cannot pass, he says, the food will rot. There's wisdom in the spacing. Not just in the food racks, but in everything the Mongols build. Gur vents are never fully sealed, their roof flaps tied open during cooking adjusted subtly with each wind shift. Storage sacks are hung not in shadow, but in cross breezes. Even sleeping mats are sometimes raised on low platforms to allow air to move underneath. It's less about insulation and more about circulation. You walk with Batu to the edge of a low ridge. From here, the wind moves freely, stirring the grass in waves. Below, a family has set up a mobile dairy station, buckets, skins, wooden paddles, all arranged in a tight arc. Women stir ladle churn. The sound is soft rhythmic. A young girl no older than 8 grins as she hands you a bowl of fermented mare's milk. You sip cautiously, bracing for a punch, but it's mellow, slightly fizzy, refreshing. The secret. It's been chilled by wind alone. The girl points to the goatskin hanging nearby, shaded by a piece of felt but exposed on one side. The felt is wet. The breeze passes through it and into the skin. Evaporative cooling at its most elegant. A sack of airag cooled not by machinery, but by motion and moisture. You're invited to help make more. You learn to strain yogurt through layered cloth, twist it tight to remove excess whey, then press the soft curds into small molds made from hollowed wood. These will dry over the next week, turned daily like sunbathing bricks. Eventually, they'll become the arul you chewed earlier. Historians still argue whether this drying technique originated with Mongol herders or was adopted from older steppe civilizations. Some claim early Scythians practiced similar curd preservation. Others argue the Mongols refined the method, mastering wind use with uncanny precision. Regardless, it works. You glance at the horizon. There's movement, a cluster of riders, hunters returning. A few carry slung bundles that jingle like bells. As they draw closer, you see why. One bundle is packed with river fish wrapped in wet grass and bound with braided leather. The grass still drips slightly, and the smell isn't foul, it's fresh. The wind has done its part. In camp, a boy strings wild garlic on a line, setting it beside the curds. Another hangs strips of beef marinated in sour milk and salt. It's all calculated, not just to survive, but to sustain. That night, the wind changes direction. A storm is on the edge of the sky, just visible as a bruise of color beyond the hills. You help secure the drying racks, weigh down the sacks, and lower the tent flaps just so enough to protect, not trap. Inside the jeer, you lie back and watch the smoke curl out through the roof ring. It's the same breeze that stirred the curds, the same breeze that chilled your drink, the same breeze that turned raw milk into magic. And just before sleep takes you, Batu's voice drifts in from the entrance. Remember, he says cold is not a thing. It is an agreement between you and the wind. The storm doesn't roar, it whispers. You wake before dawn to the sound of felt flaps fluttering like tired birds and rain tapping on the canvas in a rhythm so soft it might be imagined. The inside of the jeer smells like damp wool and yesterday's herbs, the coals in the fire pit still warm beneath their ash blanket. Outside, the air is cooler, sharply, deeply so, and you realize this is exactly what the herders wait for. The storm is a gift. You pull your cloak tight and step into the gray morning. Rain mist coils around your ankles. The camp is quiet, but not asleep. You hear low voices, the occasional bleat, a bucket clinking. At the edge of camp, a woman named Altansernai is kneeling beside a broad, shallow basin made of beaten copper. Rain trickles into it, and beside her sits a tall jar wrapped in soaked cloth. You nod in greeting. She nods back. Then, without speaking, she opens the jar. Inside yogurt. Chilled. Tangy. Perfect. This is the Mongol rain trap, a simple system designed to take advantage of rare storms. The air drops in temperature. Rain moistens the cloth. The wind draws heat away from the jar. Everything works in harmony. Not planned, not controlled, just accepted. Too much rain, Altansarnai says, and it spoils. But just enough. She smiles. Cold breakfast. You help her ladle the yogurt into wide bowls. A pinch of wild thyme is sprinkled on top. Someone passes around dried apricots. The combination is strange and lovely, sour, sweet, earthy. It tastes like a season in transition. As the storm begins to fade, the camp shakes itself dry. Horses are led to higher ground. Tents are unfastened and aired out. You work beside the others, pulling felt aside, checking seams, patting down mud. Today the lesson is about resilience. Mongols do not chase perfection. They prepare for fluctuation. Their cold storage systems don't demand constant temperature, they anticipate change. Clay jars are placed in shaded hollows, but always with drainage paths. Leather sacks are wrapped tightly, but never sealed too tight to vent. And most remarkably, everything is mobile. You follow a family that's decided to relocate just a few kilometers east to a slightly higher ridge. Not because of danger, just preference. The wind is better there, the mother says, nodding toward the horizon. You help roll the felt fold the lattice walls, gather the cooking stones. The children carry clay pots and slings. Each item is placed with care, but no preciousness. If something breaks, it is repaired. If it is lost, it is replaced. But most things don't break, because they're built to move. The ride is short but invigorating. The ground squelches under hooves, the wheels of carts leave muddy trails, and the sky brightens slowly above. At the new site, you help reassemble the GR. You're getting faster. You know where the slats go, how the bands tighten, which felt panels face which direction. And once the structure is up, before the floor mats are laid, before the hearth is lit, the cooling systems are set. The storage pit is dug first small and round, just deep enough to stay beneath the sun's reach. It's lined with flat stones found nearby, smoothed and cooled by the rain. A layer of damp wool goes in next, followed by baskets of milk cheese herbs. Then the vents. Two narrow air shafts dug slantwise into the earth and braced with thin branches connect the pit to the open air. You crouch to feel the breeze pass through them. Even now, in the calm, after the storm, there's motion. A quiet exhale from the belly of the land. Historians still debate whether these vents were intentionally designed to follow airflow patterns or if they evolved naturally from trial and error. Some argue the oldest ones mimic earlier burial mounds or spiritual dwellings. Others believe they were learned through watching animal burrows, foxes and marmots instinctively choosing the coolest parts of the plain. But here's what you see they work. The storm has passed. The sun reappears tentative and shy. And inside this freshly built dome, the air remains fresh. You sit near the storage pit, slowly sipping cooled milk mixed with ground juniper and a pinch of salt. It tastes alive. Later that afternoon, you're invited to help with another preservation trick, burying clay jars. These aren't like the ones you saw before. These are narrower, deeper glazed on the inside with a mixture of tree sap and ash. They're used for long-term storage, usually for salted butter fermented vegetables, or sometimes thickened milk curds meant for winter. Each jar is sealed with wax and cloth, then lowered into a hole lined with broken pottery and charcoal. The lid is covered with damp grass, then packed with soil. A flat stone seals the top. A mark is etched nearby, nothing obvious, just a circle of pebbles. So the children don't dig them up early, someone jokes. But there's reverence in the process. Quiet. Even the dogs sit back while it's done. You help pat down the earth and realize this, too, is refrigeration. Not by freezing, not even by chilling, but by stillness. By pause. By quiet. By trusting that time will do what it must, and that the earth, if respected, will not betray its contents. That evening, as the stars return and the rain smell fades into dust, you sit beside the cook fire with a bowl of something rich and spiced. You don't ask what it is. You don't care. It's warm. You are cool. And the balance is perfect. Across the flames, someone murmurs a prayer. Not dramatic, just thankful for the breeze, the rain, the milk that didn't sour, the dome that stayed whole, the quiet understanding between body and land. The storm didn't roar, it whispered, and you listened. You wake to hooves. Not thunderous, not an alarm. Just the steady, deliberate rhythm of early movement. Someone is already guiding a horse through the morning mist, the bell on its harness clinking like a distant wind chime. You rise slowly, brushing sleep from your eyes with the back of your sleeve, and pull open the flap of the gear. The camp is in transition again. This time, not because of weather, but because of opportunity. Word has spread of a nearby gathering, a Nodam festival. Games, food, singing, and trade. It means more than entertainment. It means refrigeration by cooperation. You help take down the jar your hands practiced now. The felt is folded neatly, the lattice collapsed, the center ring lifted with a grunt and a laugh. Horses are loaded carts, balanced. And then, as if by instinct, the whole camp begins to move slow and wide like a herd turning toward fresh pasture. By midday, you spot the first signs of the gathering, fluttering cloth banners, smoke spirals rising from dozens of fires, and rows upon rows of gers arranged in loose rings. The sound hits next, laughter, shouting, the unmistakable crack of a whip, followed by cheers. You've arrived. What's astonishing, though, isn't just the energy, it's the coolness. You had expected heat, a gathering of so many bodies under the sun should be oppressive. But the area is alive with cooling tricks, each adapted, borrowed, or shared from family to family, clan to clan. It's as much a showcase of engineering as it is of archery or horsemanship. You walk between jars that have dug shallow moats around their bases, allowing evaporative breezes to snake up from the earth. Others have suspended sheepskin bladders of milk from cross poles, shaded by woven reed mats soaked in water. As the wind passes through, it chills the skins gently, constantly. One merchant even boasts a double-walled wooden chest lined with wool and birch bark, its center packed with curd herbs and tiny blocks of hardened snow, traded from a distant mountain pass. Frozen in the belly of a cave, he says, with a wink. You peer inside. The snow is real. The curd tastes like sour cream blessed by altitude. This is cold by cooperation. You meet a woman named Surin, a leather worker who shows you how she wraps her cheese in mulberry bark soaked in horse milk, then buries it for 2 days beneath wet stones. Not for everyone, she says, but it keeps it soft. She offers you a bite. It's earthy, tangy, oddly comforting. Nearby, a circle of children is playing a game where they toss smooth stones into bowls of water, each chilled with a slice of arrol dipped in brine. The stones clink softly, their hands wet and cold, their laughter rising into the clear sky. You hear a phrase murmured again and again as you pass through the festival: "Kulth is shared." It's not a word you've heard before, not in your language. But here among the traders and herders, the singers and stirrers, it makes perfect sense. Because in the middle of this massive sunlit plain, no one is hoarding shade. No one keeps their breeze secret. Everything breathes together. Even the festival kitchen, a sprawling, organized chaos of clay ovens, fire pits, smoking racks, and ice cellars. Yes, ice. At the back, you're shown a pit dug deep into the ground, lined with ash and sawdust, where a single dome of compacted snow sits like a crown jewel. Blocks are shaved for drinks for sore muscles, and yes, for dessert. You sample something sweet served in a horn bowl, dried fruit goat milk, and finely shaved ice mixed with honey, and what you suspect is a hint of fennel. It's incredible. A texture between sorbet and custard. Not every year, the cook warns. Only when the mountains share. Historians still debate the frequency and reach of these ice-sharing networks. Some argue they were elite luxuries reserved for khans and foreign envoys. Others point to records scattered, weathered, but persistent that describe communal cold storage pits, clan-wide transport caravans, and even ice sharing as a diplomatic gesture between neighboring tribes. It's likely both, and neither. Like most truths, it depends on who tells it. You pass a storyteller surrounded by elders, his voice rising and falling like wind through grass. He speaks of a great Khatun, one of the warrior queens, who carried snow wrapped in silk across 5 valleys just to preserve the herb paste that healed her favorite horse. Another tale claims a child once outwitted a band of thieves by burying his family's yogurt cache beneath a frozen dung pile. Cold, they would not touch, he chuckles. Hot, they would steal. You believe both stories, because here practicality and poetry are not enemies. They live together, like wind and wool, like curd and clay. As the sun dips lower, the festival takes on a golden glow. You wander back toward your group carrying a new skin of fermented mare's milk, still cool, still fizzing. The path is crowded, but no one rushes. Everyone moves like they've got time. You pass a row of herders who've constructed a wind tunnel using tied reeds and wet cloth. Inside, hanging strips of meat sway like laundry. A dog naps beside them, one eye open. In a corner, 2 children are playing with a wooden model of a yakchal, their fingers tracing the dome, the shaft, the vents. They've never seen one in person, but they know how it works. Knowledge travels faster than stone. You sit with your companions as night begins to fall. The fires are lit. Bowls are passed. The stars appear one by one, indifferent and infinite. And somewhere between your second and third sip of fermented milk, you feel it again, that ancient lesson that no scroll can hold. That cold is not hoarded, it's shared. Tonight there's music. Not the full-bodied thrum of a festival, but something softer, closer. A few strings plucked near the hearth. A low whistle echoing out into the darkness. You're sitting cross-legged in a half-circle of travelers wrapped in blankets, the firelight playing along the curves of bronze bowls and glazed clay mugs. The air is cool, deliciously so. And not just because of the hour. The felt walls of the gur have been opened slightly at the top. A breeze threads its way through, subtle but constant. Beside you, one of the elders, Batu, he said his name was, taps the side of a wooden box, gently like calling something to attention. Inside the box, a ball of fermented curd, wrapped in oiled cloth and kept cool through a trick that Batu insists is older than war itself. You raise an eyebrow. He chuckles. It's not buried. It's not iced. It's sung to. You blink. Batu explains some families believe that sound vibration can help keep dairy from spoiling, that a soft, continuous hum can stabilize the curd, slow its ferment, keep it balanced. You're not sure if it's science or story, but you notice something. The box is cooler than the surrounding air. You lean in, humming softly as instructed, and maybe it's imagination, but the tangy scent of the curd seems gentler now, less sharp, more composed. Batu winks. Milk likes company. You've now encountered the spiritual side of Mongol refrigeration, a belief not widely practiced but whispered about that certain foods stay better when treated like family. That night, as the wind shifts and someone snores gently nearby, you lie awake, thinking of all the methods you've seen: cooling pits, clay jars, evaporative cloths, domes that breathe. But this one, a lullaby for milk, feels different, quieter, intimate. Morning arrives with the crisp, dry promise of autumn. You're traveling again, this time with a pair of cousins headed toward a monastery in the hills. They've heard a lama is seeking help preserving sacred butter sculptures for an upcoming festival. You don't know what to expect, but you're invited. So you follow. The journey is longer than expected, the terrain steeper, the wind sharper. But when you arrive, what greets you is astonishing. Dozens of sculptures, some the size of your fist, others as tall as your chest, carved entirely from butter. Horses, dragons, suns, flowers, wheels of fate. Every detail delicate, deliberate, and still intact. You glance around, half expecting an ice cellar. But no. The sculptures are stored in a naturally cooled cave with a narrow vent at the top. The air inside swirls gently, never still. The walls are coated in a layer of pale clay mixed with fine sand, a trick you're told to reflect heat rather than absorb it. The head lama explains that during construction season, monks rise before dawn to carve while the cave is at its coldest. They use hollow tools, keep their hands covered in ash, and store each sculpture on a rotating platform shaded by palm leaves soaked in vinegar. You nod, slowly absorbing it all. Here, butter isn't just food, it's offering, art, symbol, and preserving it isn't just technical, it's devotional. Some historians believe these butter sculptures trace their roots to early animist rituals, where seasonal preservation of fat was linked to fertility and endurance. Others argue it began more pragmatically, simply a way to extend the lifespan of an expensive good during long ceremonies. The truth likely curls somewhere in the middle. You're invited to help prepare the next batch. You don't sculpt yet, but you help with the cooling process. Water jars are arranged to form wind corridors. The outer walls are shaded with wet felt, and a small chant echoes through the chamber, a hum repeated and rhythmic. The vibrations again. The butter seems to respond. Later, as the monks gather to admire the finished figures, you sip from a carved gourd of Arag fermented mare's milk. It's brisk, fizzy, and faintly sour, but cool, always cool. Even here in a cave surrounded by stone. That night, your hosts insist on one more lesson. You're shown the monastery's library, not scrolls or books, but patterns, recipes etched into stone, not for cooking, but for layering clay, for folding felt, for digging the ideal slope of a cold pit, each one passed down like scripture. These are not inventions one monk tells you, they are inheritances. You think of Batu and his singing curd, of the butter dragon glistening in the cave, of the breeze coaxing itself through lattice slats. None of it flashy, all of it genius. And tomorrow, you'll return to the plains, to the gurs and the goats and the endless sky. But tonight you fall asleep to the sound of monks humming in the darkness, the cave air wrapping around your legs like a soft, invisible blanket. Somewhere nearby, the butter sleeps too. The journey back to the plains feels lighter somehow. Not just because your pack is lighter, though it is thanks to your enthusiastic sampling of butter treats, but because you're starting to realize something. You're not collecting trivia. You're tracing a worldview, a philosophy, one that treats coolness not as a luxury or a gimmick, but as a way of being, a kind of wisdom. You descend from the hills slowly, the wind brushing your cheeks with an edge that whispers of coming snow. Below, the grasslands stretch wide and the horizon folds into that familiar golden haze. In the distance, a few gyrs are visible tiny dots of wool and willpower in the sea of land. You ride beside an old herder named Temulin. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, it's with that same weather-beaten weight you've come to respect. You want to understand Mongol cool, he asks, not waiting for an answer. It starts with what you don't do. You wait. You don't chase the heat. You wait for it to pass. You don't block the wind. You shape for it. You don't fear sweat. You use it. You don't battle the sun. You borrow its light and thank it when it leaves. It's not a poem. It's a manual. You stop at a temporary camp to rest. This one's smaller than most. Just 2 gyrs, a few carts, and a corral of shaggy sheep milling about. But the cooling methods are unmistakable. There's a skin bladder hanging from a tripod, its leather damp, glistening in the breeze. A wooden bucket covered with reeds rests in the shade beside a low stone bench. Temulin pulls out something wrapped in wet felt goat milk, aged, thickened, and pressed into discs. He snaps off a piece, passes it to you, and nods toward the horizon. That mountain, he says, used to be our freezer. You squint. It's far, very far, and it's tall, snow-covered even in this season. He explains when the winters were colder, families would wrap chunks of snow and ice in felt and bury them near that mountain's base. They'd return in spring and harvest what remained. No ownership, no markers, just trust and memory. Sometimes he says the snow was gone. Sometimes it had grown compressed, crystallized by wind and silence. You ask why they stopped. He shrugs. We got faster horses, started moving more, stopped looking back. But some still go, he says. Once or twice a year, just to remember. To dig, to wrap, to leave a piece of winter for someone else to find. Later you watch Temulin clean a clay pot with powdered ash and snowmelt water. No soap, no scrubbing, just time and rhythm. Then he places it upside down on a rack made of curved twigs, angled toward the setting sun. The wind does the rest. Within hours the pot will be dry and cool again, ready for curd broth or a bit of yogurt kept cool by evaporation and ritual. Historians often debate the efficiency of these clay cooling methods. Some suggest that without humidity they shouldn't work, but they do, repeatedly, consistently, even in the most unforgiving corners of the steppe. You sit on a low stool beside the pot, watching it bead with dew as the sun drops. A young girl joins you. Her name is Anar. She offers you a small pouch sewn from goat hide. Inside is a mix of herbs and dried berries, sour, sweet, and grounding. You keep it near the milk, she says. It smells cold. You breathe in. She's right. It's sharp and clean like mountain air folded into linen. You tuck it into your coat pocket. That night the camp gathers early. The stars are already out, the temperature dipping fast. There's no fire, just lanterns low and steady. The cooking's already done, the eating quiet. It's a night for stories, not stews. Temulin speaks again. Long ago, my mother would bury cheese beneath river stones. Just one wheel, 1 bite's worth. For summer, when we had guests. A welcome that came from snow. You nod, picturing it. A wheel of cheese chilled by riverbed and secrecy. A surprise from the past to greet a future friend. Somewhere nearby, a dog coughs softly and settles into the grass. You sip a clay cup of broth that's warm but not hot. The kind of warmth that steadies rather than burns. This too is a kind of cold. The absence of aggression. The quiet pulse of balance. You look up at the moon rising fat and pale over the plains. Its light is cold too, but not distant, not uncaring. It just is, like the domes, like the jars, like the breeze. The wind shifts again, and from across the camp you hear a boy laughing in his sleep. It sounds like the clink of ice against copper. You smile and wrap your blanket tighter. Tomorrow you'll learn about snow traps and felt insulation. But for now, you rest. The next morning you wake to a crunch underfoot. Not from twigs or dry grass, but from frost. Thin, glimmering frost that crusts the steppe in ghostly white. You kneel down and brush your fingers across it. It crackles, then melts instantly against your skin. The fire is already burning low. Breakfast is simple salted curds, a bit of barley, and miraculously a cold piece of melon. You glance at it in surprise. Someone chuckles. From the trap says Anar, pointing to a low wooden frame set in the ground about 50 paces away. You rise, curiosity already pulling you forward. The trap is a kind of basin, shallow, wide, and lined with black stone shards. Around it, wicker windbreaks shield the space from gusts, but leave the top open to the sky. Overnight, the air pooled here, and with it, the chill. What little moisture there was gathered and froze, and anything left in the basin like a tightly wrapped melon held onto that precious coldness long after sunrise. You're amazed again. No metal, no electricity, just stone placement and patience. Temulin joins you, holding a canvas-wrapped bundle. Sometimes, he says, unwrapping it to reveal a shallow wooden bowl. We line the trap with snow during the cold season and press these on top. He lifts a second bowl, its base darkened from moisture. The cold transfers, and if the wind's right, it lingers for days. You look around, there's no wind today, only silence. But when the wind does come, he adds, we let it do things. You tilt your head. Come, he says, you need to see the felt. He takes you to the edge of the camp where large sheets of felt, some nearly the size of the jeer walls, have been stretched between wooden posts. They flap gently, the morning breeze tugging at their corners. These are our summer walls, he says, but not for shade, for breath. He steps behind one and disappears momentarily. You follow. The air behind the felt is cooler, not dramatically, but enough to feel it, enough to understand. Temulin taps the surface. Wet the felt, and it cools faster. Leave it dry, and it still slows the heat. But the trick, he says, is to move the air. You remember the wind catchers, the badgers in Persia. Here the felt does what the towers did, just simpler, just softer. Historians still argue whether the Mongols developed this felt wall method independently or learned it from traders passing through Central Asia. Some say it's older than trade routes. Others point to shared techniques along the Silk Road. Either way, you're standing in the middle of its success story. Back at the gur, Anar is coiling rope. She's preparing to lash the felt tighter around the lower half of the structure. Hot air rises, she explains matter-of-factly. We let it out the top. But down here, we seal the cool in. You nod, following her hands, as they work quickly, efficiently, looping and cinching with practiced ease. Each fold of felt creates a pocket. Each rope knot creates pressure. Every inch matters. Inside the jeer, her mother is preparing fermented mare's milk for travel. The skins are arranged in a circle each with a wet cloth draped loosely over the top. Why cloth, you ask? Evaporation, she replies, and tradition. And then almost as an afterthought, and it keeps the bees away. There's always a practical reason, and usually a poetic one too. The heat rises as noon creeps in. You step outside and see the sun glaring down, unrelenting and silent. But the jeer holds its cool, not icy, but steady, like the belly of a wise old horse that's seen too many summers to panic. Temulin beckons again. He's near a small rise at the top of which is a curious sightstones arranged in a ring with a wide opening at the center. Beneath it, faint threads of white drift upward. Steam. No cooler than that, mist. It's a snow trap, he says, but reversed. This one isn't for freezing, it's for storing cold air gathered from a deep pit below. The stones around it are soaked each night and allowed to radiate that chill upward as the sun hits them. During the day, the effect lingers. Weak, yes, but noticeable. Good for keeping grain cool. Or sitting near he grins if you're tired. You sit beside it and let the cool air swirl around your ankles. In a few days, you'll move again. The herders are planning a shift toward the river bend, where the animals can graze and the nights grow even colder. But today is a day for repairs. Stitching saddles, oiling rope, checking felt linings, and cooling clay jars. A row of them stands behind one of the carts, each half buried in the dirt, each swaddled in thick wool. Inside, yogurt tea leaves even a piece of salted fish wrapped in linen. The jars are positioned to catch the afternoon breeze, and each has a tiny vent hole carved into its neck. You ask about it. Temulin answers. It lets the jar sigh. You smile. The day ends with quiet laughter and bread still cool from storage. You sit on a rock watching the wind play with the grass, and you realize something important. Mongol cooling isn't about defeating heat. It's about accommodating it, adapting to it, partnering with it like you would a strong horse that refuses the bit but follows a steady voice. And that's the genius. It isn't loud, it isn't flashy, it's layered like felt, like knowledge passed from hand to hand without fanfare. Tomorrow you'll learn how the Mongols made snow last until spring. But tonight, you'll sleep beside a felt wall, your breath cooled by stone and wool and wind. And in the silence, the earth will do what it always does. It will wait. It will cool. It will whisper. By the time the morning sun lifts above the far hills, you're already moving. Not fast. Mongols rarely hurry, but steadily westward toward the banks of a stream said to run cold even in late summer. You ride beside Temulin once again, though he says little today. His eyes scan the horizon like a man reading an old familiar text. Around midday you arrive at a thicket of scrub trees sheltering a shallow depression in the earth. The herders call it a Karmad, the dark grove. Here the earth has been shaped not dramatically, but intentionally. A basin roughly 6 feet deep filled with compacted grass earth and straw sits beneath a tangle of branches that twist and shade like nature's fingers. This is where the snow was kept. Not now, says Anar, hopping down from her pony and pointing into the depression. But in winter, when the snows are heavy and dry, we pack it. Layer by layer. Straw, then snow, then felt. Press it. Cover it. Forget it. Forget it. She grins. That's the point. They walk away from the pit like it's already done its job. And in a sense, it has. These ancient snow traps weren't meant for daily access. They were seasonal time capsules. You packed them and hoped. If the weather held, if the felt didn't tear, if the covering stayed intact, you could return months later to find frost still sleeping beneath the straw. Sometimes they found nothing but dampness and ants. Other times, cold treasure. You kneel beside the trap, scooping up a handful of dry, shaded dirt. It's cool, not cold, but a few degrees below the air. Enough to matter, enough to preserve. Scholars debate the exact efficacy of these traps. Some believe they were more ritual than reliable. Others cite oral histories of summer weddings celebrated with chilled mare's milk proof, enough that someone somewhere succeeded in storing the season. Temulin returns with a flat slab of stone. He sets it on a pair of sun-bleached stumps and gestures for you to help. From a canvas satchel he removes a wrapped bundle snow, or what's left of it, cold and damp and laced with grass. He sets it on the slab and waits. You do the same. Together you sit and watch the snow melt slowly, gracefully, without complaint. A few flies buzz past uninterested. A dog flops down in the shade. Somewhere a crow scolds the wind. This is part of it too, says Temulin, watching, letting the cold go. Later, they show you how they used to preserve herbs beneath snow bundles of thyme and wild onion wrapped in linen buried alongside the winter traps. The snow protected them, the straw cushioned them, and when the spring came, you had greens with flavor still intact. You sip cold water from a stone cup and lean back. It's a strange thing chasing the cold through a hot landscape. It feels like cheating at first, like trickery. But eventually you understand it's trust. In air, in time, in earth. That afternoon the herders prepare a special meal. A dish only made when stored ice is found late in the season, cooled wheat porridge with salted yogurt and chopped herbs. Served cold with a drizzle of sour berry syrup. You're handed a shallow bowl carved from wood, its rim darkened with age. It's humble, beautiful, and startlingly cold to the touch. You taste. It's like eating memory. The evening brings songs. Not loud ones. Not joyous exactly. More like chants, a kind of musical exhale. Stories of past winters, of buried snow, of spring weddings, where cold milk was poured over the hands of the bride and groom to cool their tempers before they heat. You laugh and someone nearby winks. Even now, ice means more than refreshment. It means restraint, calm, a steady hand on a hot day. You ask one of the younger herders how they keep track of these snow traps across the steppe. We mark the trees, she says, showing you a trunk with a pair of notches cut sideways like eyes. Or we stack rocks. But mostly, she taps her temple. We remember. Later, you walk with Temulin along a ridge above the grove. He points to the patterns of grass, to the way the earth tilts, just so to the way a certain bird circles at midday when the breeze changes. All this, he says, is part of knowing how to keep the cold. You nod. It's not about invention, it's about observation, stillness, surrender. When the stars return, you find yourself curled beside a leather water bladder, cooled by the evening wind. Someone offers you a folded piece of cloth, soaked in snowmelt and time. You press it to your forehead, and the sensation is so vivid, so immediate, you nearly gasp. It's not just cold, it's clarity, a kind of focus you didn't realize you'd lost. The others sleep nearby, their breath soft, their wool blankets pulled high. The night is silent except for the occasional rustle of felt or the quiet hum of the wind threading through grass. And you still listening realize that everything here, every jar and snow trap and shaded basin, is a kind of lullaby. A song for the sun to slow down. A wish whispered into dirt and time. You close your eyes, the last taste of cooled porridge still on your tongue, and let that wish carry you too. Morning comes slowly like the stretch of a cat in tall grass. You blink awake beneath a sky so wide it nearly makes you dizzy. Above hawks circle. Below the camp begins to stir not with haste, but with certainty. The smell of smoke, of barley, of saddle leather. You're on the move again. Today's destination isn't far, but it holds something special, a legend whispered, more than spoken. The cold cave. It sounds like a fairy tale, a myth conjured by children to explain why a goatskin bladder might still hold frost in late July. But no one laughs when you mention it. Instead, they nod quietly, solemnly, and begin packing. You travel light one-pack goat, a few skins of milk, and some cloth-wrapped bundles of dried meat. The sun is sharp by mid-morning, but the wind picks up as the steppe begins to climb, first gently, then more insistently. Temulin guides you with the same ease he applies to everything light touches, glances a raised chin. He doesn't talk much today. It's as if the closer you get, the less there is to say. By late afternoon, the terrain changes. Hills roll into low cliffs. The grass thins. Rocks dominate. And finally, there it is. A break in the earth. Not much to see. A crack, really. Dark and narrow, rimmed with moss and shaded by a crooked tree that seems too stubborn to die. Temulin points. That's it? You approach. The air changes before you even reach the opening. Cooler. Damper. Like walking into breath. Inside the cave is barely tall enough to stand. The walls glisten with condensation. Your footsteps echo. The deeper you go, the colder it gets. By the time you reach the back, no more than 20 feet, and the temperature has dropped noticeably. At the far wall, nestled in a hollowed-out niche, rests a series of clay jars. Most are sealed with wax. A few are open, filled with something that looks suspiciously like butter and wrapped tightly in wet cloth. You crouch, touch the stone beneath one jar. It's cool, genuinely cool. No tricks, no snow, just shadow stone and stillness. Temulin explains that this cave isn't man-made, but it's been used for generations. His grandfather called it the sky's pocket, a place the sun forgot. Historians still argue about these kinds of sites. Some believe they were once permafrost hollows, left over from an ancient glacial age. Others think they're simply lucky breaks in the rock where evaporation insulation and lack of sunlight conspire to keep things cool. The Mongols. They don't argue, they just keep using them. While you rest in the cool silence, Temulin unwraps a bundle of cheese, hard dry, but chilled. You nibble and grin. It's strange how thrilling a cold bite of dairy can be in the heart of summer. Back at the entrance, the group begins unpacking. They're here to restock. The cave isn't visited daily, only when the right season allows. Ice or perishables that survive the journey here will last weeks longer than anywhere else. One herder, Einar's uncle, tells you about a time they stored apples here for a wedding feast. Still crisp after 4 weeks, he boasts. Even had guests ask if we'd stolen them from China. You laugh, and he winks. You help carry bundles to the back stacking jars on smooth rock shelves, each wrapped in straw or felt. There's a rhythm to it. Placement matters. Airflow matters. Don't crowd the mouth, Anar warns, motioning toward the entrance. The cave has to breathe. Of course it does. Everything breathes out here. You notice something curious as you work a trickle of water seeping from the far wall. You follow it and find a tiny pool no bigger than your palm. Clear as glass, it sits, motionless, cradled in a stone hollow. You touch it. Cold. Shockingly so. Temulin leans in. It's not magic, he says. It's just the earth remembering. That night you sleep near the cave. No tents. Just wool blankets and the shelter of a bluff. The stars blaze and the wind whispers across the rocks. No fires. Too dry. Too risky. You dream of stone jars and silent caves of frost that lingers and summer that waits its turn. In the morning, the cave is sealed again. Not locked, not forgotten. Just paused. The group leaves a small token near the entrance, a tuft of horsehair tied to a reed. A quiet thank you. You ride back across the steppe, feeling the heat press in again. But this time, you don't mind, because you carry something with you now, a kind of reverence for cold, for time, for the way stone can hold a secret and not tell it all at once. As the plains widen again and the grasses return, someone hands you a drink. Chilled milk with crushed berries. You sip. Still cold. Still miraculous. And for a moment, just before you hand the cup back, you say it out loud. I get it now. Temulin hears you and nods. That's all he ever wanted. The last leg of your journey brings you full circle back to the first camp, the low hills rising behind you. The herders weaving felt in the distance the smell of fermented mare's milk curling through the dusk like an old memory. But now everything feels different. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You've sat beneath a yakchal-like dome, built from grass and wind. You've tasted snow in the desert. You've touched stone that remembers the winter better than most men do. You've watched people slow down, not out of laziness, but as an act of design. And now, on your final evening with the tribe, you're invited to one last ritual. It's not a festival, not a feast. Just a fire circle and a bucket of cold water pulled from the shade of a buried clay jar. Around you, the air is alive with the soft shuffle of slippers on grass, the clink of cups, the low hum of old songs. Temulin sits beside you, cradling a wooden bowl of ice-churned butter. Tonight, he says, we remember. You ask, remember what? He shrugs. What's gone? What stayed? What we keep cool so it doesn't fade. And that's the truth, isn't it? So much of what you've seen, what you've touched, was never meant to last forever. It was meant to hold for a while, just long enough, just until the right moment. A cool drink, a shared bowl, a breath of shade. One of the elders begins to speak, not loudly, not ceremonially, just calmly like he's pouring tea. He tells of the first milk jars kept cool in creek beds, of summer births marked by snow-fed blessings, of lovers who sent blocks of ice across valleys wrapped in wet sheepskin, carried by brothers who never said why. And as he speaks, the younger herders listen, not out of obligation, but hunger. These aren't bedtime stories. They're operating instructions for surviving a planet that more often than not burns. You sip from a shared skin of yogurt. It's sharp and cold and perfect. Someone begins to pass around a tray of small sweets, rice cakes chilled over shaded stones, honey thickened in clay crocks, a dab of salted cream that might have been ancient yesterday. And then it happens. The wind changes. You feel it too cool, not quite cold. A shifting of pressure, a ripple of intention. The nearby badger hums like a sleeping flute, catching the breeze and coaxing it downward. You look up. A clay jar at the edge of the circle begins to sweat condensation blooming across its surface like a slow blessing. The moment passes, but you're awake for it. And now before sleep, one final story is told. It's a tale about a grandmother who built a milk tent out of dried sheep belly and wild grass. about how she learned to tie the roof flaps just so to catch the morning wind but block the midday sun, about how her milk stayed cool for 2 extra days long enough to trade, to share, to save, and how people called her milkwise until the end of her days. Not rich, the storyteller says, not powerful, but remembered. You feel that word sink into your ribs. Remembered. The fire crackles. Someone nearby hums. You close your eyes, not to leave, but to linger. And in this soft flickering twilight, you understand that the Mongols never saw cold as a luxury. It was a practice, a language, a form of respect for the living and the perishable. Because coolness buys you time, not just for food, but for thought, for breath, for each other. You lie back, the felt beneath you, warm, the wind above, just cool enough. And for the first time, you don't need a blanket. You have the story, the practice, the memory. You are in a way insulated. And now let the day fade behind your closed eyelids. The steppe quiets. The horses have stopped their restless shifting. The milk jars rest shaded and still beneath layers of clay and cloth. The fire has shrunk to coals, and the circle of voices has melted into sleep. The wind, once bold, now barely there, moves softly through the felt walls of the gear, stirring nothing but dreams. You are wrapped in memory of stone caves and snow pits, of straw-packed milk and walls that breathe, of shaded bowls filled with ice and syrup, eaten in silence as the sun tiptoes away. Let those memories settle like dust across your mind, soft, weightless, necessary. Each one is a tile in a mosaic that stretches across centuries, a mural painted not with brush or pigment, but with patience, with small acts of cool defiance in the face of brutal heat. Tonight you carry those acts with you, not as a burden, but as comfort, as calm. Breathe in. Cool air, the kind that's earned, not summoned. Breathe out. The heat of the day carried off by wind and story. Let your body rest like milk in a shaded jar. Let your thoughts drift like snow kept safe in straw. Let your spirit tuck itself into the folds of an old wool blanket, one that smells faintly of herbs and summer's retreat. The domes are sealed for the night. The winds have been caught. The milk is still cool. And you, time traveler, witness, dreamer, have everything you need. Thank you. Sleep well, traveler of wind and wool. When you're ready for the next story, whether it begins in an ash-swept forge, a honey-drenched temple, or the whisper of reeds by a Nile canal, I'll be here. Until then, rest easy.